Good morning or afternoon, everybody. My name is Kevin Kirkpatrick. As mentioned, I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today. The goal for me when talking to Adam and his team was really to look at creating an online event that had good order and good customer and candidate experience. So a lot of what we'll talk today about is how to look at ensuring a good candidate experience, but also managing the process and trading and uh, and tracking candidates so nobody gets lost in the process, given that it's virtual.
Yeah, and the context behind this is that Kevin and I did an event together for his hospital in Toronto, and we learned a lot in that process. And there was a lot of interesting things we tried out because it was the first time doing it together that I think are really worth sharing and could bring a lot of value to everyone watching this. Because as you all know, it's a real struggle out there to find, screen, and then ultimately hire nurses. And we just want to share what we've learned around the best ways to do it. So here's some of the stats from the fair we ran. It wasn't on a massive scale, Kevin, was it?
No, it's this is what happens when you have about a week to plan. So we did it on a reasonable scale. In addition to that, I mean the cost per hire was quite reasonable, and probably reduced over time because we had the ability to track the candidates from the virtual career fair, and there's a very good chance that several were hired additionally after the fact as well. So it's an ongoing success story as well as just that singular day, right?
Okay, yeah. So let's get into it. What we're going to do today, everybody, is split our conversation into three different steps. So we're going to talk about managing a team and technology, because I think for me as well, I like being around people face to face. I'm a people person, and I think a lot of people in HR, talent acquisition, are the same. Ever since COVID came along and put that screen between us, we've kind of lost something, and it's difficult, especially with the technology, to coordinate it amongst a lot of people. So that's something which I think we got right, and I want to draw upon. The next bit is actually making nurses show up. So how can you actually take people from putting in 5 to 10 answers to sitting in front of a recruiter? And again, that's something which we have quite a few interesting tips that I don't think a lot of people have spoken to before this presentation we're doing. And then starting just at the top of the funnel, really getting nurses to sign up. So how do you reach as many qualified, interested, and available candidates as possible and make them want to come ultimately? So let's jump into it, Kevin. If anybody has anything they want to add, any experiences you've had, please put it into the chat. We want this to be an open learning experience for everyone. After these three conversation points, maybe after about 20 minutes, I'm going to talk you through the steps we did in that event so you can see it laid out very clearly, what we did, and hopefully get some inspiration from it. So Kevin, yeah, when it came to managing your team, I know there was about 8 or 9 recruiters. What were some of the priorities before the event?
So a lot of it was understanding what our outcomes were and what areas that we were specifically going to target, and then build the teams internally. So I had 5 recruiters, and we pulled in some HR business partners as well. Luckily, I had a very talented team with a ton of charisma that we created individual rooms for each recruiter and paired them with a hiring manager. So, and we paired it based on portfolios that they had a good knowledge of, so that when the candidate came into the room, it was a quality conversation and not a rushed conversation. So focusing on creating a process flow from the candidate side, and also aligning that with the recruiters, testing your Zoom accounts, and because we use Zoom, and ensuring that you had enough people and had your Zoom rooms set up and organized well in advance.
Okay, and what would you say are some of the pitfalls you'd recommend to people who who want to try this, but like it's kind of the unknown. They don't know what might become a problem. Based on what we did, what do you think they should be aware of?
I think one of the things that you have is, I think you need to make sure you have enough resources to cover the event, as well as have an additional resource, potentially person to cover unknowns. So often we did run into issues where, Patrick had to follow up with a candidate to ensure they had the right Zoom link, and that were no shows and stuff like that, or and then support the technical difficulties, right? So it's ensuring that you have candidate contact info, as well as the scheduling and stuff like that. So if something does go wrong, you can use that personal touch and call the candidate and ask them, or leave a message on why they didn't show up. Focusing on how you route candidates as well. So if you're looking at emerge nurses, making sure that the candidates that come into that Zoom room are interested in emerge, right? Because otherwise it could be an awkward conversation. Because if you want to work in palliative care, well, if you start interviewing with the manager of emerge, it doesn't look good for a candidate experience, right?
Yeah, I think that was a big thing for the recruiters as well. It's a bit demoralizing when they're just getting irrelevant people who would be much better served in a different room.
Mm-hmm. And then also having conversations between the recruiters that you would potentially do somewhat of a debrief afterwards, because my team saw the big picture so well that they were actually bouncing people and candidates amongst each other.
Mm-hmm.
So you got an additional value. So if somebody was better suited for a different area, they would they would communicate with each other and with the hiring managers and get residual interviews and stuff like that for later dates that were better suited. So they focused really much on having quality interactions with the candidates. Given that it's not a physical event, you need to be focusing heavily on how the candidate's going to be handled in the process, because you want them to feel welcomed, you want them to feel heard, and you want them to feel like they're actively being considered.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And we have here assistants. So whenever we did this, for context, everybody, we had one of our team members who was there to shore up any tech difficulties, like candidates getting the wrong Zoom room or candidates not able to enter. And I think we got 50 people show up initially, but we actually added 8 people on who had a problem, and we were able to fix it. So if you have, you said, Drew and other people from HR, you have like that resource, I think that is really crucial to shoring up the errors, because let's face it, they're going to happen, especially if you're not doing this every week.
Yeah, what I think the other piece is, by using the tools that AppleChat uses to garner the registrants and track all of the individuals, you create a pool of candidates that you can draw from and that you can communicate with ongoing. So even if they don't show up for the event, let's say they got called into work, because AppleChat tracks all the data, and because you're tracking the contact info, it allows you to continue and build a relationship with that candidate, right?
Yeah. So I think, if somebody doesn't show up, that's by no means an indication that they're not interested anyway. I think there's so many different reasons why they might not have shown up. They just need a little bit more effort and a bit more kind of pushing, so that they will get on the phone and continue along the process. But that brings us on to like making sure those nurses show up. One thing that we did was we sent relevant reminders to people. So we didn't just say, thanks for booking, and then 1 hour before, here's the link. I think everybody who signed up to this, you'll see that we sent you something when you signed up. We sent you something a few days before, which was meant to be engaging and get you excited, and then we sent the reminder. That's something which is quite often overlooked, right? Not really getting people excited. What else would you say, Kevin, is important to make sure the nurses show up?
Well, I think creating a relevant story around your advertising and events as well, like not just not just saying, hey, we're having a career event, right? Like the beauty of this is we had been doing Facebook advertising with AppleChat prior. So we had already been doing advertising in that space. So this was just one more opportunity to share content that was in line with the content that we'd already been sharing. So it was almost like a build up to the date. And then the repetitive conversation with them keeps them continually engaged. And we actually had people that were calling the hospital directly just to verify and confirm that they were scheduled for an interview, right? So the repetitive conversation makes them feel like there's a bit of a personal touch, which encourages them to buy into the event and be available, right?
Yeah, I think they want to feel like you care about them. And it's so competitive out there. I think the people who win are going to be the ones who make themselves as interesting and as engaged as possible to the candidates.
Well, I think telling a story for a little while before you invite them to a career event is beneficial, right? Because you want them to be interested in you a little bit to then be interested in investing the time to do the event. So, I don't think you just on Thursday decide that next Friday we're going to do a career event and then do it. Like, I think you need to have a build up to it to create some interest in your entity before you just do it, right? It should be a culminating event and not the lead event.
Yeah. Do you think it's a good idea to kind of mine your ATS to get people to come to this, or is that kind of dealing with too many old candidates who might have been rejected?
No, because sometimes people apply for jobs that they're not ready for, right? And they don't always update like if someone a registered nurse applies right out of their BSCN program and they apply to work in palliative care, well, they may have not have done the necessary courses at that point. But if it's something that they're interested in, 2 years later, they may have created those additional palliative care courses and they're now eligible, but they won't update their record in your ATS, right? Unless they apply to a job. But the goal here is to reach out to people, get them interested to participate beyond just applying for a job. So I think if you mine your ATS, mining sounds bad, but if you engage with candidates in your ATS, they may have changed. And if you've got your screening questions as part of your aspect and part of your event, you'll engage with the appropriate people within your database, right?
Yeah. On that point, like if you could go back and do an event again, what would you change about it?
I think the key I would have done was be a little more specific about and maybe narrow the areas that I was doing the career fair for, because we had 9 separate rooms. Each room was a different clinical area. And I think that was too many because, some rooms were booked the entire time, others weren't. I think what I would do I would probably try and maybe have 4 rooms, multiple managers, and then do kind of team interviewing. But it would be interesting to continually get the hiring managers' feedback and what they think too. But I think I would probably limit the number of rooms and try and increase the quality of the conversations because of that, while still getting the return on the return on the activities, right?
I think from my perspective, that was an issue in terms of these two things, like getting people to show up and then the tech. So if you have 4 rooms, that's 4 things you need to have correct. But if there's 12 rooms, it's 3 times the work almost. So what we did was we called everybody as soon as they signed up, just to ensure they were qualified, and if they weren't, tell them they weren't suitable. And then before we would, I think it was a day before, we'd call them to confirm they were going. And that really helped, but we still saw a lot of people who, when it came to the hiring manager, weren't exactly what they were looking for. So I think if we had to focus that to maybe 4 or 5 specialties, it would have yielded like a
Yeah.
bit better.
Yeah. And I think the other piece is that, I mean, like, I had the luxury of having super skillful recruiters. And I think if your team is strong, even if you have 4 rooms, you can still consider applicants for other areas outside of those 4 rooms, because your recruiters will know that that person's not a fit for their room, but might be a fit somewhere else. So I think you can still get a larger impact, but by being more targeted with the specific number of Zoom rooms, right? So have 4, but that are your 4 highest need areas, let's say, but you might recruit for a 5th, 6th, or 7th area just by virtue of having your recruiters that understand the big picture, right?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Be interested if anybody's done that before or has anything to contribute. Just put a message in or send it to Patrick, and he'll be able to field it to us at the end. I want to move on now to the final point, the one I think is extremely important, actually getting nurses to sign up. Like, how can we get qualified, interested, and available nurses to come to this thing? It's a different type of offer than traditional jobs on job board, and I think that's why it's so powerful. And there's a real opportunity here to make hires where we're not currently doing on our standard posting. So Kevin, what do you think are some of the takeaways on that?
Yeah, so I think so as part of this process, I looked at a bunch of different solutions, and part of the reason for approaching Applichat was because I talked to Indeed, for instance, and Indeed was willing to post and sponsor traffic, but they wouldn't. There were latter parts of the process that they weren't engaged in that I would have had to do myself, and that would have been utilizing our entire budget just on Indeed traffic. So I think you have to look at multi-channel traffic, so Facebook, Instagram, Indeed as well, and that's where when you and I started to design this, we talked about going across the different platforms and getting people to sign up and see it in multiple places. So I think that's the key, is that you get the people that are surfing Facebook and getting Facebook Messenger text. You get people from Instagram and Indeed as well. So you hit all the different places where they're hanging out. And we shared it on LinkedIn and stuff like that too. So you got it through all your different platforms. And then I think utilizing your existing database and inviting candidates that are in your database to participate as well goes a long way. I think the other thing that helped a lot was the fact that you screen candidates before doing that, so that somebody was screened for relevant licensing, relevant experience and stuff before they got in front of the hiring manager. Because that was one of my biggest concern was, somebody from out of jurisdiction that couldn't even work in Ontario was going to show up for an interview, and I was going to lose credibility with the hiring manager. So ensuring that there was a base level of credentials, so that I wasn't wasting the recruiters or the hiring manager's time, was a huge thing.
Yeah, because like the last thing you want is all the slots to fill up. You're so excited, and then on the day it turns out it's just a waste of time for everybody.
Yeah, well, we all know how easy it is to sign up for stuff on the internet, right? And so, I don't want the first 100 people that found it easiest. I want the people that I want to talk to, right? So focusing on the preliminary work, preliminary screening and advertising and stuff like that is really key, because I want quality discussions. 100 discussions that nets 5 quality discussions is not beneficial. I would rather talk to 10 people that results in 5 quality conversations, right? So there's an understanding of scaling quality conversations and not just scaling the number of conversations.
Yeah, because I think like from this experience, doing it outside of just job boards opened up a new pool of candidates that weren't necessarily seeking a position, but it's a much easier sell to say, like, here's an instant 15-minute interview if you're qualified, sign up here. than to put a job in front of them and get them to make that application. So we found, so we got like over 100 signups, which is great. And I think a big part of it was the ads, which did say 15-minute instant application, or instant interview rather. Click here, and you can jump into it. It's that ease of application to come here, and just the streamlined process. Whenever you're doing this, everybody, is where it's going to win you those passive candidates that aren't necessarily looking for a job, but would be if you can get them in front of the hiring manager and speak to them, and you can get them. You agree, Kevin?
Yeah, I think that the ability to not be perceived as going into the ATS black hole gives candidates a better feel, knowing that they're signing up to actually have a conversation with somebody, and it's not an anonymous job posting. I think that goes a long way, and I think that by tracking the data and keeping information on all the people that you've engaged with allows you to follow up, and it allows you to continue to build relationships. And we did quite well going from a good number of interviews to a large number of second interviews, and then eventual hires as well, right? So I think the event was a lot more successful than I was expecting. I was hoping for 2 or 3 hires, because if you invest a single day and stuff like that, and the amount of money that it cost, I felt that was a reasonable ROI. And then, I think by when all was said and done, it was 3 times that that we were successful with, right? So I think, and it was a good experience for our hiring managers. So a lot of them enjoyed the process too. So that was a good feedback too, is that they felt like they were taking part, and they felt like they were able to identify candidates quickly through the discussion. So I think that was, I think it was good, because it's a value add to the candidate, right? Like if I'm a candidate and I'm interested in an organization and I know I can talk to a live person without having to fill out all of this data and send my resume and everything else, if I can expedite that conversation, and you've got engaged recruiters like I had there, your ability to engage and attract the candidate goes a long way.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Like for the next 10 years, people are just going to want more instant, more speed. Need to rise to meet it. So thanks so much for telling us about that, Kevin. What I want to do now, I'm sure Kevin's got you all interested in what we actually did. So I'm going to show you the process and draw on some of the comments Kevin made to number one, let you see how it worked, and then number two, provide you some ideas which you could perhaps take away, or if you want, at the end, I'm going to make you on a special offer where we could actually do this for you, your hospital or your senior living organization. So whenever we were speaking, Kevin was saying to me, I need to get external hires who haven't spoken to me before. He really was the impetus behind this idea of doing a career fair outside of the traditional channels, because everyone's on job boards in this room, and whenever a nurse goes on that job board, they've got a multitude of options. It's dizzying, and there's so many places that they could apply for, it's hard to stand out. So whenever we set about planning the career fair, we said, we're not going to do that. We're not going to compete for a small audience. We're going to go out into a much wider candidate pool, a blue ocean, if you will, and reach nurses where they're spending time and the competition aren't trying to get them either. So the process was, where are the candidates spending time? We discovered it was these channels. So on social media, as Kevin said, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, on phone apps, on websites. Yes, we did this on job boards as well. That's important. That's where candidates are. But really, the idea behind it was let's take a broad pool of people and show them what we have. Next step for everyone, I think Indeed have this as well. It's let them apply quickly, but also make sure they are screened. So you need some sort of 60-second application in there where somebody can qualify themselves and then come through as a candidate who's not going to waste your time and who's going to make the most of the time for themselves as well. So your recruiters and the candidates have a great experience. Next, another important thing that I think we did well was the tech setup. So we made like a mini site for the candidates, which was really easy for them to navigate as well. So we want to provide a great experience whenever they click, give them the times, but in a way that lets them know it's with us and that we're really 10% better than the competition who's trying to hire them next door. That's so important. So whenever you're setting up events, just ensure that all the Zoom rooms or whatever you're doing it on are correct. Double check that. We set up a calendar system where they automatically got a text and an email with the Zoom room, and they were sent that across a period of 5 to 7 days. And that, I think, helped with the show ups. Here, another good kind of feature is like a countdown, so people know when it is and people get excited. And also you want to touch base with them a few times before the actual event. So that will be whenever they applied, we called them, we sent them texts, sent them emails, and just before the event, we called them as well. That's to make sure that everyone doesn't just show up, but shows up excited and interested and actually willing to have a conversation. If you can excite them in that pre-event sequence, then they're much more likely to attend because they're interested, rather than just forget about why they signed up in the first place. So whenever we did this, we set out like a communication schedule where if they click the ad, their screen, if they sign up, they're sent a text and a call. And this multi-touch point thing was a huge bonus in just squeezing the most out of the advertising spend. So squeezing the most out of those signups, so the most as many people as possible would actually show up. And if they don't show up, call them. Make sure that you're capitalizing on that interest and you're not just assuming that they don't want to speak to you. Something might have came up. So here's some of the stats that we were speaking about. 58 people showed up. They moved 22 to the next stage, and within 4 weeks, 5 hires. We don't have the accurate numbers on like the next few months, but Kevin said he thinks it's probably going to be more than that. What I want to do for you all today is kind of make it easy to navigate this opportunity and all the things that we've spoken about. I imagine that it can seem like a little bit like this, so much information coming out. So what we're doing is we have a special offer for the people on this webinar, and because there's so much novelty and perhaps frustration and anxiety whenever you go to make an event, I think a lot of the people I spoke to before this, they wanted to improve their events. They hadn't done an event and they wanted to know how to do it. We're coming out with an offer where we will guarantee that nurses will attend. So that's nurse in the seat on the Zoom call in front of your recruiter. If you want to explore that with us, what you can do is take this link. Patrick's going to put it in the chat and book a conversation with me. I'm going to talk you through exactly how it works, show you which plan I think is the best suited for you. And if you want to do it, you can move forward and hopefully replicate the same results that Kevin got. If you don't, hopefully you will have learned something as well. So what we're going to do is put that link in the chat. We're going to leave this up and take some questions and answers while that's there. And if you have any questions about this offer, just visit the webpage or send a message to Patrick. So Patrick, I'm going to bring you back in here. And if you'd like, you can field us the questions that people have asked. Second. There we go. So yeah, Patrick, would you like to unmute yourself?
Okay, there, great. Now you can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I should be coming back on video too at some point here, but so that's great. I just put the link in the chat, so it's there, so people can jump right over to that. I'll send it out in LinkedIn later as well to make sure everyone gets it if you lose it from the chat here. So I had a couple comments and it'll tie into, so maybe I'll first say if anyone has questions, send them to me here and we can jump them in for Kevin and Adam. So there is one question, and maybe I'll just start with some comments that both Kevin and Adam spoke about the importance of having someone online and someone available to deal with those glitches that might pop up. And my recollection is that it was important to have someone online early in the day, because early in the day, we started getting all sorts of messages from people with last minute cancellations, last minute rescheduling, and having people canceled and opening up times to move other people in was really useful, because we did need to reschedule and get some new people, last minute people booked in. So having someone online really early in the day was really useful. We also had people that were changing specialties at the last minute, and we needed some manual support to get people moved around to the different rooms that Kevin talked about to get them into the specialties they were looking for. And then we also, as Adam and Kevin both mentioned, when things got backed up a little bit with some of the technical slowdowns at the beginning, we actually jumped right in and helped out with some of the screening of nurses so that we wouldn't lose them. When Kevin and his team were backlogged a little bit or running a few minutes behind, we jumped right into doing some screening of the nurses so that they felt that they were connected, they weren't ignored. And then we linked them up with Kevin and his team after. So it was, of course, the important thing is not to lose those nurses in frustration and have them walk away and not come back. Okay, so someone asked a question for Kevin. Kevin mentioned about it would have been useful to have fewer rooms than, I forget how many you said you had, Kevin, at the time. Was it 8 or 9? And
Yeah, I think we had 8 or 9.
okay, so the question was, well, if you want to have a room for every specialty, can't you just do that if you have enough people to manage it?
You can. The challenge is making sure you have enough candidates to leverage those rooms as well, right? Because part of it is, if a hiring manager blocks, let's say 2 hours to do interviews, and then there only gets 2, then the perception that they'll have is that it was an unsuccessful event, right? So part of it is making sure that you're busy and stuff like that, because you're asking your hiring managers to give up time to be available for this. So if you water it down too much, that you've got too many rooms, then you make it a challenge from that standpoint. And I think that in some rooms we just didn't have the same volume, right? Our OR room didn't have much volume, so it would have been better to create a surgical services room and lump 3 hiring managers together, so that you had a good experience for the hiring manager as well.
Okay, that makes sense. Great. You kind of touched on this a little bit, or you referred to it. Someone else asked about working in a small hospital, a small location, if it's really worthwhile having a virtual career event, and because not sure if they're going to get the numbers to make it of interest. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
So, there's 2 aspects of it, right? There's the actual aspect of branding your organization, and then the hiring event unto itself, right? So part of the value of doing the career event was the excessive amount of advertising and branding that was put out in advance of the event. So there is a value to that as well. And then, let's be honest, if you're a smaller hospital, it's just going to be done on scale, right? So you may see 15 people in an hour or 2 hours and hopefully hire them, right? Because by focusing on the screening and all of those other pre aspects, you should have the quality of candidates come to these events that mean your potential to hire and the probability of hiring is increased. So really, I think it's worth your time and energy, even if it's 10 people, because if it's 10 people and you make 2 hires, your return on investment, both for time and cost, is probably still going to be high enough that it makes it worthwhile.
Okay, great. I don't have any other questions coming up yet, but people can still pop them in. Thanks to those who added me on LinkedIn during the call. My LinkedIn is there in the chat. And as I said, we'll be able to make sure you get invited to our next webinar on April 16th. So, and Adam, we're going to be able to send out the recording as well later, right, of this webinar?
Yeah, so after 1 hour after, you'll get the recording link and the slides, so you can rewatch it every night or every time you want to kind of think about how to do an event, or if you want to share it with your colleagues, then feel free.
Okay, and I do have another question just popped up here. So the question is, any advice on how to drum up invested interest from company stakeholders to show them the value of a virtual event? So how do people on the call, especially I think if these are frontline recruiters, not decision makers, how do they go back and pitch this to their hiring, to their managers and the people that decide about how to spend money and time?
So I'll field that if you don't mind. We had been working with Facebook advertising beforehand, and we're seeing value with the advertising piece unto itself. So what we were doing is we were extrapolating the success we have with Facebook ads to the success we could predict with the career event, right? So part of it was drawing a comparison between the two, and also it was a notion of finding successes that you could market and share. So one of our earlier campaigns using Facebook and using AppleChat was we were able to hire 3 ICU nurses. So when I was talking to the director of the ICU and other directors, I could say that, listen, this type of advertising generated these number of hires, and then we could extrapolate that to what it would be if we did an event, right? So I think that showing them how it works somewhere else, and finding the people internally that are already bought in and leveraging them. And then luckily for me, the recruiters that I had at Humber were super energetic, were willing to try new things at all times. So their enthusiasm was also contagious for the hiring managers. And not every hiring manager decided that it was as beneficial as possible, but when you've tried all kinds of other things to recruit and you come up with a new idea, there has to be some adoption or hope that people will adopt it because they just want to try anything that's going to work. And if you have the ability to partner with organizations that have done events like AppleChat before, they can share the data with you, right? They can share the success ratios, and you can start extrapolating what that's going to look like from that, right? And we were the first hospital in Ontario that I knew of doing it, so we didn't have that luxury, but we leveraged the successes that we had with the Facebook advertising prior to help us justify why we would do it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's convincing people to try something new can be really challenging, but desperation sure helps, right? And I know a lot of the people that registered for today's event were mentioning that well, we got to try something else because we've tried everything and we've still got lots of gaps. So it's time to try something new. And the idea of a virtual hiring event got their attention. So yeah, that's good, really good advice.
I've seen other people and other organizations continue to do it. I think the problem was that I found was trying to find a singular solution that covered it from start to finish, as opposed to, we'll host the Zoom rooms or we'll do the sponsored advertising. It's getting the ability to wrap it all together so that you minimize the potential to lose candidates, maximize the reward and the return because you've tracked those individuals the entire time, right? Because these are all relationships. They're not just somebody showing up. It's a potential relationship for your organization. So being able to manage the flow of communication through that relationship is paramount.
That's great. Someone did ask, you mentioned Zoom. Someone asked if Zoom as the go-to platform nowadays, if that's the best or one of the best for holding a virtual hiring event. Maybe that's an Adam question.
Yeah, so whatever you use is probably the best bet, and whatever you've got adoption with now is probably your best bet. But the way Adam set up all of the landing pages and all the Zoom rooms and stuff like that was key to our success. So, I mean, I'll leave that to Adam to comment on.
I think, yeah, if really, so a lot of the platforms are similar. They're doing a video and you can record the video. So you kind of want to avoid some of the potential pitfalls. So as Kevin said, best to use something that you have already adopted internally and that you know how to use. I would say Zoom's good because there's an awareness amongst everybody in society these days that Zoom's like that thing you go on to do video calls. It's not like I'm saying, here's a Ring Central link, and they're kind of confused. They're like, what's Ring Central? You want them to be comfortable in the environment and able to navigate the tech behind it. So Zoom is certainly probably the best platform for that side of things from the candidate experience. From like the recruiter experience, it's not too expensive. I think it was like, it's probably wrong. It was like $20 for a room for a month. Might be more, might be less, but it's not like a massive expense. And you can even do a free room if you want to save money. So it's good. I would recommend using Zoom.
Okay, it's working today. Great.
Yeah.
I don't have any other questions yet, Adam. So I don't know if we want to turn it over to you for other comments.
Yeah, well, I just want to say thanks everybody for coming. We're just at the end of our time together now. I hope that you have gotten some new ideas about running virtual events, and some conversations will come from this internally, ideas that you have. But yeah, I just want to say thanks to Kevin and Patrick. And if you're interested in this, in our help for your next nurse hiring push, then we do guarantee the results. So on that point about stakeholders, we put this in because, you know, our potential clients were saying we need something to show to stakeholders, and we guarantee at least 20 people to show up. Just fill that link in and then we can talk about it. So thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thanks everyone. Check out the webpage, the link that I put in the chat, and stay tuned for future webinars from Aptly Chat about nurse recruitment. And we'll get the recording out to you as well from today. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Talk to
See
you
you
later.
later. Bye.
Bye.